Hey everyone, welcome back to MangaMinute. I'm thrilled to share my latest recap video with you. If you missed the previous one, no worries, just take a quick peek in the description below for the link. Now, let's dive right in and enjoy.
The bandit leader's threats filled the air with an oppressive tension. His voice carried a dangerous edge as he loomed over the situation, making it clear that refusal would not be tolerated. The man's words dripped with menace, promising dire consequences if the money wasn't handed over immediately. He painted a grim picture of the future, where the Cheonhyejeong Trading Company would be barred from using this vital route, leading to cascading losses far greater than the sum in question. The leader's tone suggested this was not a mere threat, but an absolute certainty, a grim fate awaiting anyone who dared to cross him. Yunho, standing amidst the simmering hostility, wore a smirk that contrasted sharply with the bandit leader's aggression. Beneath the surface of this exchange, Yunho's mind was calculating and composed. He acknowledged the bandit's cunning attempt at manipulation, an effort that nearly swayed him into compliance. But there was a reason for his refusal, one that transcended mere defiance. Yunho was not about to be duped into a situation where the bandit leader could simply deny ever receiving the payment, creating further complications. No, if this transaction were to occur, it would do so under Yunho's terms. He needed to face the leader of the Aso clan directly, ensuring that this charade would end with the return of every piece of silver unjustly extorted from Cheonhyejeong under the guise of tolls. The bandit leader's demeanor shifted, adopting a mocking casualness. Leaning on his axe with a sense of assured victory, he dismissed Yunho's demand with ease. The leader of the Aso clan, he claimed, was conveniently away on business and wouldn't return for several days. With a sly grin, the bandit leader suggested that Yunho could wait in this desolate place if he so wished. He assured Yunho, in a tone dripping with false sincerity, that he would safeguard the money until the clan leader's return. Yet, the implication was clear: there would be no return, no restitution. The bandit leader was fully confident in his scheme, certain that he had maneuvered Yunho into a corner where the only way out was surrender. Yunho, however, had other plans. Behind his calm exterior, a storm of resolve brewed. He knew this confrontation would be the turning point, the moment where he would reclaim the wealth taken under false pretenses. Yunho, unfazed by the threats, let a sarcastic smile play on his lips. The idea of waiting days for the leader of the Aso clan was clearly not an option, but he wouldn't waste his time with drawn-out negotiations either. With a deliberate movement, he reached into his pouch, plucking out a single coin as if to make a point. His eyes briefly flickered toward the coin before he launched it with pinpoint accuracy, sending it spinning through the air. The coin struck its mark perfectly, hitting the bandit leader's axe and knocking it from where the man had been leaning on it. The leader, unable to follow the speed of Yunho's movements, was momentarily stunned. His gaze snapped to the ground where the axe now lay, and disbelief clouded his face as he realized the coin had embedded itself into the weapon's surface. The impossibility of it left him speechless, his earlier confidence shattered. The MC, still calm and collected, reached for another coin, his mocking expression making it clear he wasn't done yet. He flicked this one with the same precision, and it sailed through the air toward the bandit leader, this time hitting the man's ear with a sharp, devastating strike. Blood spattered as the coin severed the ear cleanly, and the leader recoiled in agony, clutching at his wound as shock and rage twisted his features. The leader, now desperate and wounded, barked orders to his men. In response, the remaining bandits drew their weapons, the sharp sound of swords leaving their sheaths filling the tense air. They rushed at Yunho with their numbers, hoping to overwhelm him with sheer force. But Yunho, ever composed, remained still amidst the chaos, his hand dipping into the pouch once more to retrieve another coin. The sight of this made the bandits hesitate, their combined assault faltering as they realized the futility of their efforts. Yunho stood unperturbed, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the violence surrounding him. His control over the situation was absolute, and the bandits, despite their numbers, could only stand frozen in fear, knowing their fate was now entirely in his hands. Yunho's voice carried across the clearing, his tone dripping with mockery as he taunted the bandits. He stood there, calm and unflinching, daring them to take the money he offered so freely. His eyes glinted with a dangerous amusement, his challenge an unmistakable reminder of the power he wielded. For a moment, the bandits hesitated, their fear palpable as they glanced between each other and the man before them, who had effortlessly turned their threat into a mockery. The bandit leader's mind raced, his thoughts consumed by the display of skill he had just witnessed. Blood still seeped from his severed ear, the sharp pain mingling with a newfound dread. The coin had not merely been thrown. It had flown with the lethal precision of a flying knife infused with sword chi, embedding itself into solid metal with terrifying ease. He realized now that Yunho was not a mere man but a force beyond their comprehension. His bravado and threats had been laid bare as hollow against this monstrous display of power. Panic surged through him as he came to a grim conclusion. Confronting Yunho would lead only to their ruin. With a sharp command, he signaled his men to retreat. The bandits, previously frozen in their indecision, turned and fled toward the woods, relief mingling with terror. Their leader, clutching his wounded ear, stumbled and ran alongside them, the throbbing pain serving as a constant reminder of their narrow escape. His eyes, wide with a mixture of anger and fear, cast one last glance back at Yunho. Even as he shouted his threats, the words rang hollow in his ears. He knew that today was not a victory but a bitter retreat, a day that would haunt him with the shame of their defeat. As the bandits disappeared into the forest shadows, the clearing grew quiet once more. Yunho stood alone, watching their retreat with an air of resigned indifference. The thrill of the moment had passed, leaving behind a sense of anticlimax. He had sought amusement in this confrontation, a way to toy with those who thought they could intimidate him. But in the end, they had proven too cowardly, their resolve crumbling at the first true display of power. Li Riang noticed a coin on the ground, its surface glistening with a dark, crimson stain. Picking it up, he murmured in shock, recognizing the unmistakable color of blood. His eyes quickly darted toward Yunho, concern etched across his face as he called out to him. Yunho, who had been standing in the aftermath of the confrontation, muttered under his breath, irritation flashing in his eyes. Li Riang had returned, and with him came a barrage of questions that Yunho had little patience for. Li Riang hurried forward, his expression a mix of worry and disapproval. His voice was filled with concern as he demanded to know what had happened, his gaze fixed on the blood-stained coin. He was not worried about Yunho's condition but rather the fate of the bandits who had faced him. To Li Riang, even those who walked the path of banditry had lives that held value, lives that should not be discarded lightly. However, Yunho's irritation grew at the implication that he had acted recklessly. He shot back a sharp retort, gesturing around them as if to point out the obvious. He was unscathed, standing perfectly fine amidst the remnants of the encounter. But Li Riang was not so easily diverted. His concern lay with the bandits, not with Yunho's well-being. Despite their roughness and criminal ways, he believed that their lives held worth. Yunho, however, responded with a mocking reminder of Li Riang's own actions, the times when he had not hesitated to throw a kill talisman at living beings. The irony was not lost on Yunho, and he made his point with a cutting edge to his voice. In his view, the world was filled with those whose existence did little more than bring harm to others. It was a harsh reality that Yunho accepted without the sentimentality that Li Riang seemed to cling to. Turning away, Yunho walked toward the woods with purposeful strides. His intent was clear, his next move already decided. The encounter with the bandits was merely a precursor to the real confrontation that awaited him. He was on his way to meet the leader of the Aso clan, to end this matter at its root. Behind him, Li Riang watched with a mixture of frustration and concern, his questions unanswered. The path Yunho walked was one shrouded in his own sense of justice, a path that Li Riang found difficult to reconcile with his own beliefs. The bandit leader seated on a boulder, his face contorted in pain as one of his men bandaged the wound where his ear had been. His body shuddered with each wave of agony, and curses spilled from his lips, all directed at Yunho. His anger simmered just beneath the surface, fueled by the humiliation and the searing pain that had yet to subside. The person tending to his injury worked with a practiced hand, though not without irritation. He scolded the leader for his theatrics, his tone betraying a lack of sympathy. This was not the first time the bandit leader had acted impulsively, nor was it likely to be the last. Nearby, another member of the group shook his head in exasperation, reminding the leader of the warnings he had given about crossing paths with Chonhajang. The consequences of challenging such a powerful entity had been clear, and now they were paying the price for ignoring those warnings. The leader, however, was not in the mood for reproach. His temper flared. His pride stung more deeply than the wound itself. He lashed out verbally, directing his anger at his men. In his eyes, they were just as complicit in this disaster, having blocked the passage and set the stage for this confrontation with Yunho. He seethed with the knowledge that today's events were far from over. The news of their defeat and his own injury would inevitably reach the ears of the Lord of Aso, a revelation that carried its own set of dire consequences. This failure was a stain on their reputation, one that could not be easily washed away. The atmosphere around the bandits was tense and filled with an uneasy silence, broken only by the leader's occasional growls of pain and frustration. His men exchanged uneasy glances, aware that they were caught in a precarious situation. They had underestimated their opponent and overstepped their bounds, and now they awaited the fallout from their actions, knowing that the Lord of Aso would not be pleased. From a distance, Li Riang observed the bandit group with a solemn expression. His eyes, filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve, watched as the wounded leader was tended to by his comrades. Li Riang's thoughts drifted to the nature of life and death, a contemplation that weighed heavily on his conscience. To him, every death was a tragedy, an occurrence that carried an inherent sense of regret and pain, regardless of the circumstances. He had often spoken of the importance of avoiding unnecessary loss of life, a principle that guided his actions and beliefs. In moments like this, he couldn't help but feel the weight of that principle pressing upon him. Yunho, standing beside him, regarded the scene with a different perspective. His gaze was steady, unflinching, as he took in the aftermath of the encounter. In his eyes, the bandits were the architects of their own suffering, bound by the consequences of their choices. He was not indifferent to death, but his understanding of it was far more pragmatic. As he watched Li Riang struggle with his emotions, Yunho pondered aloud on the nature of foolishness. He likened the bandits to a snake caught in a fire, not because the flames consumed it, but because of its own ignorance that led it there. To him, the bandits' plight was a result of their own short-sightedness. Yet Yunho's mind was already on the next step. He hoped that the leader of the Aso clan was a person capable of reason, someone who could see beyond the foolishness that had led to this conflict. For Yunho, this was not a simple matter of mercy or cruelty. It was a matter of dealing with those who understood the world as he did. If the leader of the Aso clan could be reasoned with, then perhaps the situation could be resolved without further bloodshed. However, if the leader proved to be as short-sighted as his subordinates, Yunho knew that he would have to act decisively once more.